A lot of you have heard about the people who died because of dirty water in Flint, but do you know what the water did to the brains of the kids in Flint, Michigan? That is a haunting part of the story. To help us discuss it and find out the facts, we're going to bring on Anthony Baxter, who's an award-winning director who made the movie Flint. He's also made You've Been Trumped, You've Been Trumped Too, A Dangerous Game, and Eye of the Storm. Anthony, welcome back to the TYT.
Thanks for having me, Cenk.
No problem. So, first of all, I want to clarify something that's really important. The people who died in Flint died from Legionnaire's disease, not from the lead. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we know officially there are 12 deaths registered from Legionnaires, but the true number is believed to be much higher, around sort of 50. And that's because we know about the pneumonia deaths, which has similar characteristics in pneumonia death to a death from Legionnaire's disease. But yeah, that's right. In Flint, the lead hasn't killed anybody as such. It has damaged people horrendously, of course, but it's also true that many mothers have talked of the loss of their unborn children as well through the poisoning in Flint, and all of the other chemicals that are in the water, of course. I mean, you know, we know about the lead, which you've mentioned there, Cenk, and also Legionnaires, but there's also other contaminants. I mean, people's hair was falling out, people had skin rashes. A lot of that is still unexplained today.
So I want to talk about why they made this decision and the consequences, because there are actually people facing criminal consequences, politicians, which is unheard of in America, so that's interesting. But the reason I started with Anthony asking you about Legionnaire's disease versus lead is because since the lead does long-term damage as opposed to Legionnaire's disease, which instantly can kill you, right? I think I'm worried that there's 3,000 towns that have lead problems in their water right now. Reuters did a huge story about it several years ago. But since it's not killing people on the spot, we're kind of ignoring the same thing that happened in Flint with lead happening all across the country because it's not jumping out to us as more immediate. So that's why I wanted to go to that amazing fact. You talk about what happened to the kids, their average test scores 3 years later. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the test reading results of children have plummeted in Flint, and that's a group of children studied by Dr. Mona Hannity, the local pediatrician who made the link in the first place between the high lead levels in Flint. Because just to remind your viewers, Cenk, about what happened, the water source was switched in Flint, as you may remember, from the Great Lakes to the local river. And the local river, it was the corrosion of that water, the corrosive nature of that water that damaged the pipes across the city of Flint. And as you rightly say, we know that so many cities across the United States and in my country as well, in Britain, has the same issue. These lead pipes buried deep beneath the ground. We don't really know the full extent of what's going on down there a lot of the time. And when you pump corrosive water through the system, as what happened in Flint, it interacts with that protective layer in the pipes, and it tore that protective layer off, the corrosive water, because it hadn't been treated properly. And that is what led to those, as scientists said at the time, you may remember, this toxic waste levels of lead, big chunks of lead coming off these pipes and into people's homes, a population in Flint at the time of around 100,000 people. And the impact that has had is just devastating, because we do know that children's reading score levels have plummeted in the tests that have been done by Dr. Mona Hannity and others studying the impact of the lead poisoning on children in Flint. But there's so much more that we don't know. And I think that's why I think it's so important that the story of Flint isn't forgotten, because of the many, many cases around the country, as you say, where similar things have been going on since. And it's so easy, isn't it, with all that's going on in the world, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the cost of living or whatever it is, for the spotlight to move on to other stories. But I just think it's really crucial that the story of what happened in Flint and what happened to the children and the people right across the city is not forgotten.
So guys, when they switched the water to the dirty water, and we'll get to why in a second, it created the diseases that killed people fairly immediately, but it also corroded the pipes, as Anthony just explained, which caused the lead to come out. The lead does brain damage. There is excellent analysis showing that the excess lead in our oil, by the way, the gas that we use in our cars, the paint that we use, et cetera, caused a massive spike in crime in the 1970s and 80s. That it wasn't related to any policy, it was related to the lead. And now we're seeing it again, now that the lead is in the water, to the point that Anthony was making. I'll give you the stat. 3 years later, reading scores had dropped more than 70%. Just in 3 years, dropped 70%. That is unbelievable. Lead literally causes brain damage. So, and it is not just Flint, guys. 3,000 towns across the country. And you don't know it until it's too late in a lot of these instances. But now we do know because of movies like this and the attention that's being paid, and yet we're not doing nearly enough. So let me go back, Anthony, to the original cause of this in this particular town. They were getting the water from the lakes and it was working fine for 5 decades. Why'd they make the switch in the first place?
Well, Governor Rick Snyder, and I remember you covering this story extensively at the time, Cenk, he wanted to save money. He sent in so-called emergency managers into Flint to help to save cash. Now, the people in Flint were paying, and are still paying, the highest water bills in the United States. And so the bean counters saw a possibility of reducing the costs of the water that they were getting from the Great Lakes, which came via Detroit and was piped to Flint. And they saw the opportunity to cut costs by switching to the local river. And there's a water plant in Flint, which your viewers will recall, that tower that's become the Flint Water Tower, which has become so striking as an emblem for this story. And the water tower and the water plant was an aging water plant. And they decided to switch the water source to the river to save cash. But they didn't do any of the homework. They didn't realize that this water was so much more corrosive than the lake water from Lake Huron. But as well as that, of course, there's a history in Flint in industry and car manufacturing. And what they found was that this new water source started to corrode the parts at General Motors. And when I first arrived in Flint, it was early 2015. It was before the story became a big national story. Nobody really heard what was going on. I was in Detroit doing a screening of a previous film, A Dangerous Game, which you mentioned, which has a water theme to it. And at that screening, one of the residents said to me, you should come through to Flint to do something on the water here, because we've been complaining about it since it switched to the Flint River in April 2014. So by that stage, the local people had been jumping up and down for a year about what was going on. Their hair was falling out, skin rashes. They suspected this high level of lead because the water color was foul. It was brown color. People remember residents holding up jugs of brown water on the local TV news. And nothing was being done. And it was a classic case of people jumping up and down, calling on people in power, Rick Snyder, the governor at the time, and the local mayor to do something about it. But they just ignored it. They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with the water. And the mayor was on TV drinking it, saying, this is a fuss about nothing. And the residents called in Dr. Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech to oversee a citizen science test of the water right across the city. So everybody took part in this and took these samples of the local water. And it was Dr. Mark Edwards' team from Virginia Tech that then certified that this water had a very high lead level count in it. And that was the moment when that happened, was August 2015. I remember it very, very clearly. And then Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the pediatrician I mentioned from the local hospital, she then made the link between when the water had switched to the river and the lead levels then shooting up in kids right across the city. And this was a fact now, and the local authorities couldn't ignore it, and Governor Rick Snyder then decided to switch the water back to the Great Lake source. But it was too late because the damage had been done, the pipes had been corroded. And ever since then, the people of Flint have lost trust completely in their water. I mean, I was there just a few weeks ago, and still the queues around the block, there are queues for blocks and blocks of people waiting to pick up bottled water because they just don't trust it. They don't trust the water, even though the scientists now say that the water in Flint is as safe as any other city in the United States.
Yeah. So by the way, that idea of bringing in businessmen to run government is disastrous on two counts. One, everybody assumes that businessmen are competent. Really? Have you met businessmen? So they're not a model of competence either. And secondly, more importantly, business culture is all about money, 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 money. And it doesn't care about other factors as much. That's a terrible model for the government that's supposed to protect people and emphasize lives over money. So it was a disaster waiting to happen. But last thing here, Anthony, and by the way, the movie's available on iTunes and Amazon, and you could, it's still out in theaters in some places, so flintdocumentary.com for you guys to be able to get the information. All right, the movie's Flint, and kidding aside, iTunes and Amazon, that's where you could get it. Anthony Baxter, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk.
All right, now we're going to bring on a former Republican congressman to talk about what's wrong with the Republican Party. He's the host of the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh, and he also is the author of F Silence. So not playing. Joe, welcome back.
Good to be with you, Cenk, always.
Yeah. So listen, we had the shooting in Buffalo, and so this is when the right wing says, "Oh, it's just a lone wolf. It's no big deal." You can't characterize the right wing and the Republican Party in this way, but it's not really a lone wolf. We also had the shooting in El Paso, also because of the Great Replacement theory. We also had the shooting in the synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018, also because of the Great Replacement theory. All right-wingers, all looking to attack. We see it on Tucker Carlson's show. I'm going to get to the politicians in a second. So, and Joe, on top of that, we have polling that shows that nearly half of Republicans now believe either strongly or somewhat in this white replacement theory. So, in your experience, having been a Republican congressman, what do you think, like how real is this as a phenomenon within the Republican Party? Is it still, in your experience, in fringe, or has it become far too mainstream in the Republican Party?
Hey, Cenk, it's mainstream. Not only am I a former Republican congressman, I'm a former Republican radio or conservative radio talk show host. And the scary truth is, and you and I've talked about this before, the base of the Republican Party has become fully radicalized. And what does that mean? They no longer believe in truth. They've given up on democracy. And this ugly element of the base, which used to be more fringe, ever since Trump, is now mainstream. And this is the America's changing. I wish we had 1954 America back. I wish America was whiter. That's a part of now the Republican base, and people like Tucker Carlson and Hannity and the rest of them, they inflame it.
Yeah, so Joe, I don't know if, like, since you spent obviously a lot of time in the Republican Party and because of conservative talk shows, etc., do they have a benign explanation for replace to do what, right? So like, if somebody said to me, hey, you're gonna be replaced by black people or Latinos or Jews, I would say, okay, what am I getting replaced for? What was I, like, what's the topic matter? I don't know, maybe they're better than I am. Maybe the black guy's a better accountant than I am, and then he should replace me because I don't wanna be an accountant. Like, and so the obvious explanation is, no, replace their power, and hence, obviously it's racial in its core. Do they even have an excuse or a non-racial reason that they talk about this issue?
You know, Cenk, broadly it's, and again, this was my base, and you know, full disclosure, I engaged in some of the inflaming of these folks, more than I'm proud of, but it's generally, we want white Christian America back, damn it, that's what we understand. So that's their broad feeling, and I still hear that every day from them. But Cenk, you nailed it. It's about power. It's about losing votes. They believe that if we let everybody in this country and we expand immigration and we don't secure the border, well, these are all future Democratic voters. And the Republican Party will never be able to survive in a country like that. That's what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, but super ironically, Trump in 2020 did better with Latino voters than he had in 2016, and better than Republicans in the past had. Doesn't anybody in the Republican Party say anymore, hey guys, instead of hating them and instead of assuming they're all gonna become Democrats and they're gonna replace white people, why don't we just try to win their votes?
Yes, Cenk, exactly. And that's the conversation that I'd engage in with my Republican colleagues in Congress all the time, Cenk, who would tell me privately, you know, the more these people who vote, we're gonna lose. And I would say exactly what you just said. Well, come on, let's persuade them. Let's convince them that freedom and opportunity is better than big government. But the Republicans didn't want to engage in that at all. Now, you make a really interesting point. White people are afraid of this whole we're being replaced thing. But no, Hispanics in this country, they don't look at it like this. And they are tending to vote more Republican. That's a problem that the Democratic Party has, because the Democratic Party, Cenk, is increasingly more out of touch with working class Americans.
Yeah, no, look, I would love to disagree with you on that, but you're not wrong. That's why we're both independent, because we can actually rationally look at what's right and wrong with both parties. And the Democratic Party's now leadership is filled with elitists. They never talk about economic issues. Everything is, cultural issues. And Joe, ironically, aren't the Nancy Pelosi's of the world allies with the Tucker Carlsons of the world, as they distract us from economic issues while their corporate donors rob us blind? And they both are happy to engage in the culture wars so that we don't focus on the actual robbery.
Completely. And Cenk, you and I may disagree on a lot of those economic issues, we would, but that's all these voters talk about. Look, Cenk, I hear over and over every day, I hear working class Americans across the board, they tell me, and I'll watch my language, they tell me that Republicans are jerks, Trump's just a liar, but Democrats are wimps who don't understand people like me. And so you're spot on, and you've talked to this a bunch. The Democratic Party, as bad as the Republicans are, the Democratic Party is becoming this party of like wealthier elites, utterly out of touch with what some working class dude anywhere out in California feels.
The minute that anyone on the left says that to them, it's both Democratic leaders, consultants, lobbyists, and most importantly, the mainstream media that will jump down your throat and say, no, do not believe your lying eyes. Those pathetically weak and incompetent Democratic leaders are actually lions and master strategists and amazing heroes. On what planet? They get steamrolled by Republicans on the daily when the Republicans have gone in this crazy direction, and they're still winning. Trump is now likely to win the next presidential election. You can't get any weaker than that. So look, I can go on for 20 minutes straight about that, but I actually want to come back to one unfortunately racial component in this story, okay, in the Buffalo shooting story. So in the white replacement theory, in a lot of the instances, the theory is, and Tucker Carlson is referred to George Soros, who's a code word for this, right? And the manifesto, the shooter talked about this. They say, we are going to be replaced by Latinos and black people, etc. But it's the Jews that are orchestrating this. So now it's coming through clear as day to people like me paying attention. If you tell anybody in Washington, they're still like, oh, no. Both parties are great on it. They're the same on anti-Semitism. They're not in my opinion. But Joe, how much do you hear that? Did you hear that before? How much do you hear that today in right-wing circles when people think that everybody in the room's right-wing? And
it's there, Cenk. It's look, and I think you'd agree with me. There is anti-Semitism is interesting because you find anti-Semitism on the far right and the far left. It's not nearly as subtle though on the far right, because again, this notion of I want a white Christian America, we focus a lot on the fact that all these black and brown people, and they're upset about the black and brown people coming in, but they're also really upset as what they'll say, the Jews behind the scenes who are helping to orchestrate all of this. But all of my former Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate, not only are they ignoring the white supremacy that happened in Buffalo over the weekend, they won't say a word about this anti-Semitism in their own House.
Yeah, no question. And so now Elise Stefanik is the number 3 Republican in the House. She's in Republican leadership, and she's talking about a permanent election insurrection in her ads, saying that the immigrants are going to cause the insurrection by replacing presumably white people. And she talks about how granting amnesty to illegal immigrants, as if somebody was going to do that. No, that's not even on the agenda. Stefanik was basically a corporate Republican and a Paul Ryan acolyte. The fact that she has moved in a lunatic direction doesn't indicate that she's a lunatic because she previously did not have any mental health issues, right? Is it a bellwether for which way the Republican Party is going?
Look, Cenk, all of us Republicans, we had a decision to make in this era of Trump. Do what we believe is right or sell our soul to get reelected. And the vast majority of Republicans, like Stefanik, sold their soul, adapted to Trump to get reelected and stay in power. And I get pissed off at all of these talking heads on MSNBC and CNN who continue to ask how much power Trump holds on the party. It's his party. And that is not changing anytime soon. He will be the 2024 nominee. No Republican will challenge him. And Elise Stefanik, Kevin McCarthy, all of these people know it.
So Joe, from your perspective as someone who's not on the left, when you see Biden say, oh, it's this fraction of the Republican Party that's ultra MAGA, and that's the problem, not all Republicans, isn't he in essence helping the Republican Party to pretend that the party is not all MAGA, is not all Trump, when in reality it is?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Cenk. And I think I read last week that a bunch of Democrats or liberals helped him 6 months of research come up with this ultra MAGA phrase. I don't know what that means or where that came from. I don't think Joe Biden and I don't think most Democrats understand the threat. This is not fringe in the Republican Party. This is now one of America's two major political parties is fully anti-democracy. And I don't know why Joe Biden is afraid to say that. He should. Every Democrat should.
All right, you see, we're both independent minded, okay? And we're not gonna listen to anybody's BS. Joe, thank you for joining us, we appreciate it.
Cenk, keep doing your thing, man.
Do all of you know the Young Turks?
An outlet like yourself that are willing to cover this story from the very beginning.
You have the Young Turks and a bunch of other progressive forces saying this is the time to fight for our values.
And I think right now there are a lot of progressive voters, many leftists who feel like they don't have a home.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
What we've done is sustainable, slow, healthy growth. And I think that's the way news should be, where you don't rely on sensationalist stuff. You don't lean on whatever's trendy in the news at any given moment. You just go with the truth.
You gave me a platform.
You've uplifted so many other progressive voices through this network, and you're constantly looking for people that you can amplify through the work we do, through the infrastructure that you built at TYT.
It takes those early people who believe that can really be the seeds of this movement, and that has been the Young Turks.
We're super serious about the news. We also managed to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We're not TYT, you're TYT.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police. When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that Black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger Black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a bonanza ahead for you all. John Iadarola is off, but I will be joined by the wonderful and lovely Jessica Burbank in the second hour. So a little different from what we typically do on Wednesdays, but it's totally fine because we're super excited to have Jessica join us yet again on the main show. In the show today, we're also going to discuss a wide array of topics, to be honest. We are going to talk about the fallout following the damning testimony that was given by a top-level aide to Mark Meadows, who of course was the chief of staff for Donald Trump. The way that the right wing is reacting to that testimony, I think says a lot. In the second hour, we're gonna talk a little bit about what the FCC is proposing in regard to a very popular social media platform. So we'll get into that. And in the bonus episode, you know, we've done stories about the crazy things that rich people are willing to do to themselves, the crazy things rich people are willing to pay money for. And look, to each his own. I'm not trying to ban any of it. except they should pay their fair share of taxes. No, but what they're doing just for in my opinion, short drive from New York City to the Hamptons will blow your mind. You don't want to miss that. If you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching us on YouTube, just click on that join button and you can become a member through YouTube. You get all sorts of perks, including exclusive members only programming, and you help to keep TYT sustainable. You help me, you give me my voice. Honestly, anyone who works on this network, if you're a member, you give us the space and the opportunity to share the truth with the world, and we're really grateful for that. Well, I want to get to the first story in our rundown today because it has to do with the fallout following the testimony from the House Select Committee hearings yesterday, and Ginni Thomas is front and center, so let's discuss. New news reports indicate that Ginni Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, is maybe no longer willing to cooperate with the House Select panel investigating the January 6th riots and Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Now, previously she said, I can't wait to testify. I can't wait to talk to them. Clear my good name. After there were reports that she had sent text messages to Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff. She had also exchanged emails with John Eastman, the unhinged Trump lawyer who had pushed to implement this insane theory of using sham electors to replace the actual legitimate electors. That was his whole plan to overturn the election. Well, Ginni Thomas again said, I'm down to testify, I'm down to cooperate with all of this. But following some damning testimony that recently took place, featuring Cassidy Hutchingson, who happens to be the former chief of staff's aide, or was the former chief of staff's aide under Donald Trump. Now all of a sudden her lawyer speaking out and saying, no, maybe Ginni isn't gonna testify or cooperate. So let's get into the details, okay? So the committee, meaning the House Select Committee, has sought Ginni Thomas's testimony twice after learning that she was exchanging texts with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and emails with former President Donald Trump's lawyer, John Eastman. Now, her lawyer has responded to the committee's formal request with an 8-page letter questioning why her testimony was needed at all. He said the emails with Eastman, texts with Meadows, and a letter she sent to state lawmakers in Arizona, by the way, about alleged election fraud provided no basis for an interview. Now, just to juxtapose what her lawyer is saying and what Ginni Thomas had previously said, in an earlier report, after talking to the Daily Caller, Ginni Thomas said, quote, I can't wait to clear up misconceptions. I look forward to talking to them, meaning the House Select Committee. Well, who knows where she's at? What's clear to me at this point is that her lawyer is trying to prevent her from cooperating further. And I don't think her lawyer would be doing that unless he thinks that her cooperation would actually incriminate her further, rather than clear up her name or clear up her reputation. Now, her lawyer seemed to address the fact that she wanted to testify, so he didn't forget that. But he had a weird excuse for blocking it from happening, okay? So he says, quote, as she has already indicated, Mrs. Thomas is eager to clear her name and is willing to appear before the committee to do so. However, based on my understanding of the communications that spurred the committee's request, I do not understand the need to speak with Mrs. Thomas. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, he's a lawyer. I'm guessing he probably gets paid a lot more than I do. So it's weird that he doesn't understand why the House Select Committee would be interested in interviewing her, considering the damning evidence that we've already seen in the form of text messages and email exchanges that Ginni Thomas had with all sorts of unsavory individuals who are assisting Donald Trump in stealing the election from Biden, overturning the results of our democratic process, canceling out the votes of literally tens of millions of Americans. But since he doesn't seem to understand, Let me explain it to him. First off, there were dozens, 29 text messages exchanged between Ginni Thomas and Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in the days both before and after the 2020 election. Now, what did we learn from those text message exchanges? Why don't we watch?
The committee getting its hands on at least 24 texts sent between Ginni Thomas and President Trump's then chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in the days after the election. In one, Thomas writing, quote, "Help this great president stand firm, Mark. Biden and the left is attempting the greatest heist of our history." And in another, just days after the 2020 election, Thomas writing, "Do not concede." Other messages show Thomas pushing false conspiracy theories, urging Meadows to tell officials in the West Wing to buck up.
We're gonna walk down to the Capitol.
Thomas attended that rally at the White House before rioters stormed the Capitol on January 6th, but telling the Washington Free Beacon in a recent interview that she got cold and left early.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. She was at the rally and then she left right before the riots took place. Did she really leave because she was cold, or did she know that something was about to go down? And what we've learned from the recent hearings was the fact that you have Giuliani and Mark Meadows communicating with Cassidy Hutchingson. Again, that was the aide for Mark Meadows, that something was gonna go down on January 6th. If Ginni Thomas is communicating closely with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, is she also someone who happened to be aware of what was gonna take place on January 6th? Did she really just leave because she was cold? I mean, these are legitimate questions that I'm sure the House Select Committee would like to ask as part of their investigation. But that's just the tip of the iceberg with Ginni Thomas, okay? That is information that we learned about her 3 months ago. 3 months ago. More recently, we learned other damning information, which I'll get to in a moment, but keep this in mind. After January 6th, Ginni Thomas told Meadows in a text that she was, quote, disgusted. Let me repeat that again. Disgusted with Pence, who had refused to help block the certification of Biden's electoral college victory. She wrote, quote, "We are living through what feels like the end of America." This woman is a lunatic. It feels like the end of America because we haven't succeeded in convincing the vice president to do something that he has no power to do. It's the end of America because we can't overturn the results of an election that we have failed, absolutely failed to provide a single shred of evidence had any widespread voter fraud involved. Now, this woman, and the fact that her husband, by the way, is Justice Clarence Thomas, someone who could be handing down decisions in regard to, this case, what Donald Trump and his cronies tried to do with stealing this election, overturning the results of this election. It's a massive conflict of interest. And to question why investigators would want to talk to her is one of the dumbest arguments, like dumbest questions I could ever imagine. Now, it gets worse. She was also communicating closely with John Eastman, as I mentioned earlier. And John Eastman is the unhinged Trump lawyer who came up with the sham elector idea in the first place. And here's what we know. Thomas also pressed Republican lawmakers in Arizona to help keep Trump in office by setting aside Biden's popular vote win and to choose their own electors. Homegirl's hitting them up in Arizona. She's like, yo, listen, let's get rid of these electors, these like legit electors, and let's just install our own cronies and steal this election from the rightful winner. And look, let me be clear. I am very critical of Joe Biden. He was not my preferred candidate in the Democratic primaries. There's a lot. I mean, he's a target-rich environment in regard to his failures. But what's right is right, and he won the election. And yes, I'm happy that he won against Trump. He's certainly somewhat better than Trump, especially Biden's National Labor Relations Board. But there's more to this. So the email claimed that the responsibility to choose electors belongs to voters under yours and yours alone, and claimed that the legislature had the power to fight back against fraud and ensure that a clean slate of electors is chosen. So that's an email that she sent on November 9th to 27 lawmakers in the Arizona House and Senate. So she not only was communicating with all these people who were very close to Trump, who very much wanted to overturn the results of the election, she was scheming with them. She put into action what John Eastman was suggesting should be done to overturn the election. So for her lawyer, who seems to be confused, I think that there are legitimate reasons for these members of the House Select Committee to sit down with her, ask her questions, whether it's in a deposition or maybe even during testimony in one of these hearings. It is important, and I hope they subpoena her. And if she refuses to do it, she should be held in contempt. Merrick Garland should file charges against her as well as he did with Steve Bannon, for instance. Now we'll see if that happens. But the other part of this is, it is a problem that one of the Supreme Court justices is married to this woman who tried to help Trump overturn the results of the election. Will he recuse himself? Probably not. Will he be adequately pressured to recuse himself? Probably not. And so when we think about why it is that so many Americans, both on the left and the right, have lost trust in our institutions, this is why. This is part of the reason why. And this isn't one incident in a vacuum. It's a system that's told the American people, if you're not part of the elites, if you're not a powerful person, you don't really matter. But if you are a part of the elite, if you are a powerful person, you can literally play a role in trying to overturn legitimate results of an election so your preferred candidate wins, and there'll be no consequences for it. That sends a damning message to the American people. And this is not a time when Democrats need to continue engaging in the same old mealy-mouthed, weak politics. Merrick Garland hasn't even said a damn thing about charging Donald Trump, even given the damning evidence and testimony that was provided in recent House Select Committee hearings. So we'll see what happens, but make no mistake about it, Ginni Thomas absolutely should be subpoenaed. She should be forced to give a deposition in the very least. All right, well, let's move on to our next story. It's kind of related to this, but it just shows you how powerful the testimony was recently because Republicans are freaking out. I love to see it. MAGA world and right-wing media have gone into panic mode following damning testimony that was given by former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' aide, a woman by the name of Cassidy Hutchinson. This was testimony that she gave during the January 6th hearings, and her testimony was so compelling that you have one pro-Trump right-winger after the next trying to essentially dismiss her, write her off as someone who is not credible, someone who wasn't actually privy to the kinds of conversations that she testified about. And I want to start off with some of the compelling testimony that MAGA world is so upset about. So for instance, some of the most compelling testimony was when Cassidy Hutchinson described the moment when Trump had lunged at the Secret Service agent who refused to drive him over to the Capitol as the riots were about to take place. Let's watch.
Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
Now, I want to be clear about something. When I say that it's some of the most compelling testimony she gave. What I specifically mean is she paints a picture of who Trump is. Just this unhinged person who's willing to engage in violence in order to get what he wants. But when you look at the grand scheme of things and what really matters in terms of Trump's criminality, or alleged criminality, that's not the most important part of her testimony. The most important part of the testimony is when she makes it abundantly clear that Donald Trump was fully aware that his supporters were heavily armed. He was fully aware that his supporters were marching to the Capitol while chanting Mike Pence. And when Trump was specifically asked to do something about it, he refused to do so. In fact, he argued that maybe Pence deserves it because he refused to overturn the election. Now, Trump supporters thought that they caught Cassidy Hutchinson in a lie when she gave that testimony about how he had allegedly lunged toward a Secret Service agent who told him, no, we're not gonna drive you over to the Capitol. So the supporters say the vehicle that he was allegedly in, it's nicknamed the Beast, it often transports the president, is so heavily fortified that there's no way that Trump could physically lunge at a Secret Service member in the front of the car. Well, Trump said that it wouldn't have been possible for him to do such a thing as well. And Kellyanne Conway echoed that same talking point. Let's watch.
Look, I've been in the Beast many times. I've been in those SUVs countless times. I would find it very difficult to lunge into the front and be able to do that, particularly in the Beast. It's not developed that way. The president has denied this. He's denied this publicly. He's denied this privately to many people today.
So again, let me repeat, this is not the most important part of her testimony. And when I say her testimony, I mean Hutchinson's testimony. But it is being used as a way to essentially dismantle her as someone who is not credible, as someone who's not to be trusted. And it turns out that while all of these Trump cronies and lapdogs think like, got him, caught her in a lie, he was riding in the Beast, turns out that's not necessarily the case. So Carol Leonig, who is a reporter for the Washington Post, wrote a book about the Secret Service, and she actually quickly debunked this talking point, the so-called smoking gun. So let's hear what she had to say.
It would be very difficult in what is really called the Beast, the limousine, the old Cadillac. It would be very difficult over the communications equipment, I'm informed by people who ride in that vehicle rather regularly, for the president to have lunged over it towards his detail leader. But, sorry, Rachel, there's a big but, which is this wasn't the Beast. The president was riding on January 6th in what is called the Suburban. This is one where it would have been possible, a lot more easy for the president to lunge forward towards the right front seat from the back.
He wasn't in the Beast, ladies and gentlemen. He was in a Suburban. But in the grand scheme of things, as juicy as that part of the testimony was, again, for the purposes of investigating Donald Trump's role, for the purposes of possibly filing charges against Trump, that part of her testimony doesn't really matter that much anyway. But again, the right wing, I think, is using it to kind of present her as someone that's not worth trusting. And then at the same time, it's a distraction from her other testimony, which even right-wing pundits, even people like Brett Baier over at Fox News, even people like Mick Mulvaney, who was part of Trump's administration, argued was super persuasive, super compelling, and they do not think that she was lying about it. So let's go to their next tactic, right? Because they're trying to play around with this whole car situation. They're trying to make her seem like she's not to be trusted, not a credible person. And then what else are they doing? Well, they're trying to pretend like her role as a top aide for Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, wasn't really that big of a role, and she wasn't really around much, and she wasn't really privy to the conversation she claims to know so much about. So let's go to Trump advisor and garbage person, Jason Miller, making that point.
You knew Cassidy Hutchingson. What kind of I've met her a few times, but I didn't really have much contact. What kind of person is she?
She's an extremely junior, low-level aide. I don't think I ever had a conversation with her that I can at least recall of any substance or depth. But to Molly's point, this is a Rorschach test for your sanity. If you heard this story and you thought, man, I believe every word of this, I'm going to go online and say something about it energetically, something is wrong with you.
So that was Stephen Miller. I'm sorry. I think I accidentally misspoke and said Jason Miller. My bad. Stephen Miller. So you can see there. He's just trying to dismiss her as like, I haven't even had any substantive conversations with her. Hey, Jason, what would a substantive conversation sound like with a guy like you? I mean, I would argue that the only thing that this guy would find substantive, any conversation would have to be with like a neo-Nazi or a member of the KKK. Any other conversation, no substantive conversation. It's just not substantive. She's not a substantive person. She's a woman after all, right? On Truth Social, Trump also claimed that he hardly knew her, called her a third-rate social climber, and went on to criticize her handwriting. That is what he has been reduced to. How pathetic is that? Again, the theory that Hutchinson was a nobody was quickly debunked, so let me get to that. During the first impeachment trial, Hutchinson grew close to Mark Meadows as a legislative affairs staffer in the White House, former advisors said. This is according to the Washington Post. Once he was named chief of staff in March of 2020, he immediately elevated her. And she eventually became his principal assistant. She was given an office next to his, which in turn put her a few doors away from the Oval Office. The other thing I want to just note is the fact that when Trump, during his speech at that rally prior to the riots, said that he was going to march to the Capitol with the rioters, the first person that Kevin McCarthy called was Cassidy Hutchinson. He called Cassidy Hutchinson and was like, hey, you guys promised that no, he's not marching over to the Capitol and no one's marching over to the Capitol. What's going on? And she had to clarify what was going on, that there was an agreement that Trump would not be going to the Capitol. Why would Kevin McCarthy immediately call Cassidy Hutchinson and ask for clarity if she was just some low-level social climber? Makes no sense. In Trump's White House, Hutchinson had extraordinary access, and in the eyes of many White House staffers, she had inordinate power. Some derisively called her Chief Cassidy, and even House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's staff asked White House aides why she was in on legislative meetings. She was everywhere. Look, she seemed like an ambitious woman. She wanted to be at those meetings, and apparently high-level officials in the Trump administration, including Trump himself, were warned about her. So here's Brendan Buck. Okay, he's a former staffer on the Hill. He says, I don't know Cassidy Hutchinson, and I can't speak to how things worked at the White House. But when Meadows was on the Hill, he always insisted that she be in every meeting he had, no matter how small. It was odd then and doesn't seem to be working out for him now. Sorry, Meadows. Look, I love that he allowed her in all the meetings because we now have some pretty damning evidence against Donald Trump, against Mark Meadows. The right has also devolved into labeling Cassidy Amber Heard 2.0, which, listen, I watched nearly every minute of the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. If that's all they've got, they're in a lot of trouble. I don't think anyone can watch the testimony that she gave and even compare it to Amber Heard's presentation or performance during the trial that she was in. Cassidy Hutchinson was clear, she was prepared, she came with receipts, and you see the right wingers just absolutely freaking out about it. Now back to the car issue, right? The idea that Trump had lunged over at the Secret Service. There's one other detail that I think is worth sharing, which is the fact that according to Carol Leonig, the person we heard from a little earlier, sources tell me Secret Service agents dispute that Donald Trump assaulted any agent or tried to grab the steering wheel on January 6th. They agree Trump was furious about not being able to go to the Capitol with his supporters. They offered to testify under oath, which is great. If they want to clarify that, if they want to share their side of the story, sure, go ahead and do it. But I would also caution against two things. Number one, letting this part of her testimony suck up all the energy, because again, it's not the most important part of her testimony. And number two, yesterday during the hearing, Liz Cheney closed by mentioning that some of the witnesses were dealing with intimidation tactics. There was some witness tampering going on. And so here's the Secret Service spokesperson. Oh, by the way, so I want to actually go to the last graphic here, because this is what she was alluding to. So Liz Cheney remarked that witnesses had been tampered with. She gave two examples of how witnesses described their interactions with Trump, with the Trump campaign or administration officials. So for those of you who might have difficulty reading that, it says, what they said to me is, as long as I continue to be a team player, they know that I'm on the team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world. And they have reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. And just to keep that in mind as I proceeded through my depositions and interviews with the committee. So that was one person who had told the House Select Committee that he or she, they didn't identify the person, but that he or she was being intimidated. A person also, this is another example, a person let me know, you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you. He knows you're loyal and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition. So my question is, these Secret Service agents who want to testify and say, no, Trump was very upset that we refused to drive him to the Capitol, but he didn't lunge at us. Have they been tampered with? Have they been intimidated? Like, I'd like to know more details about that. But either way, at the end of the day, her testimony about Trump lunging at them, not that important. His testimony regarding wanting to essentially, her testimony about him wanting to allow heavily armed supporters to like hang Mike Pence, it's a lot more damning. A lot of her testimony was incredibly important to this investigation. We'll see if Merrick Garland does anything about it. But I think watching the desperation from people close to Trump in response to her testimony is both amusing and tells you a lot about what's really going on, what really went on, and how many people within the administration knew about what was about to transpire on January 6th. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including Sean Hannity trying to let you guys know that you don't need to worry about a damn thing regarding abortion bans on a federal level. Just be calm, complacent, and in the background, they'll implement a federal ban on abortions and just completely catch you off guard. We've got that story and more. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
My button is bigger than yours and my button works.
Your child.
Sorry about that. Kabuki Dragon, formerly Maui Greg. Maui Greg, do you still live in Maui? I'm curious about that. I've been fiending for some Hawaii time. I don't know. I don't know if I'll make that happen anytime soon, but it sounds amazing. Interesting that none of the people claiming that Hutchinson's under oath testimony is false are willing to testify under oath to that fact. That's such a great point. Gabby Marita says, solo Salt Queen Hour is the best format out of all of Thank you. Out of all of TYT's programming, queremos más de Ana. That means we want more Ana. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Eclectic Mrs. Democracy says Supreme Court justices have no blanket immunity against breaking the law, and spouses of Supreme Court justices definitely don't. It's long past time for Ginni Thomas to be held accountable for her actions. I totally agree with you on that. Dragon with a girl tattoo says, I think it's time to subpoena a few Secret Service agents to come testify in front of the committee about some things. Agree with you on that. And as I mentioned, the Secret Service agents who claim that Trump didn't lunge at them have offered to testify, so we'll see what happens. And by the way, let's see if they actually follow through on that offer to testify, right? They might renege on that as Ginni Thomas did. In our Twitch community, we have Mina Michelle, who says Biden is the president. If he is doing nothing about anything, then he is contributing to the destruction. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Look, Cenk was so angry yesterday. I didn't really want to add to that. Like when you have one host that's like going nuts, I think it makes sense to just kind of like sit back and let that happen and not contribute to it. But the videos that we shared with you yesterday of Kamala Harris and her interview with Dana Bash was infuriating. When Dana Bash like basically asked, hey, do you guys have a plan to mitigate the damage that's being done by the Supreme Court in regard to women's reproductive rights? She's like, well, yeah, what do you want us to do? Green New Dealer Dragon says, LOL, the liar for hire. Whatever she says, the opposite is true. And that's a comment about Kellyanne Conway. Octo Squiddies says, in quotes, third-rate social climber sounds a lot like a certain Oompa Loompa in chief. So true. It's always projection with these guys. All right, special thanks to our new YouTube members, including Stephen Shelton, Michael Biddulph, and also Megan Beechler. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting the show and giving us the opportunity to do what we do here at TYT. You guys really provide a voice for us and we appreciate it. All right, we have, let's see how much more time we've got. 13 seconds, let me read a super chat then. Peter Hamby says, pleading to her fifth, hiding from testimony, justice becomes blind. I love it. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. And in response to the story we just did in the previous segment regarding Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony during the House Select Committee investigating the January 6 riots, there's a comment from Stock Market Bro, and I gotta be honest, your handle caught my attention. Trump has clearly committed multiple crimes. Will he pay for them? I doubt it. The elites always stick together. They do. And I think part of the reason why is, look, you start prosecuting high-level White House officials, Trump administration officials. I think there are people on the general left. When I say left, I don't mean leftist, but I mean members of the Democratic Party. You think that they don't have their own skeletons to worry about? I think they're worried about being investigated themselves for other issues, other reasons, right? Especially issues pertaining to corruption. And so I think that's part of it. I think they do, in a way, look out for each other. And what I would hate to see is these hearings just turn into nothing more than a political matter, right? Just political theater with the hopes that this will somehow help the Democrats in the midterms. If that's what they're doing this for, it's just such a bad strategy. I think it's gonna end up being counterproductive for Democrats in the future. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. I wanna talk a little bit about what the right wing is up to when it comes to further destroying our reproductive rights.
Abortion is not illegal. It's not going to be illegal in your state of Michigan. I'd bet my last dollar that's not going to be the case. Am I wrong?
Well, No, it is illegal in the state right now. In 1931, Michigan passed one of the first anti-abortion laws. It says that there is no abortion.
So they have a trigger provision, but wouldn't you expect with Governor Whitmer and the legislature as it's currently configured, wouldn't you expect that the likelihood of them changing that is going to be pretty swift?
What you just heard was yet another example of a right-winger who has supported the anti-choice movement, who has supported a political system that has installed right-wing religious zealots in our Supreme Court, saying like, hey, don't worry about it, ladies. Don't worry about it, ladies and gentlemen. Abortion isn't illegal in every state. And what I love is that he's speaking to a state lawmaker from Michigan where they had a trigger law in place, meaning the second Roe was reversed, abortion is banned in the state of Michigan. Now, for the time being, there is some chance that the state legislature will reverse it and will provide abortion access and reproductive rights to women for now. But I wanted to bring this story and this conversation up because one of the worst mistakes the left can do, along with those who might not identify as part of the left, but do want to restore reproductive rights, do want to protect reproductive rights, is to get complacent and to trust that the right wing in America, that these religious zealots in America are satisfied now, that they're done, they're unrolling their sleeves, they're sitting back, they're watching the Housewives of New Jersey, they're chilling, they're not chilling. They want a federal ban on abortion. Let's be 100% clear about that because we're already at a disadvantage. What we're seeing in the country right now is the culmination of decades and decades of the right wing strategizing, organizing, doing anything and everything necessary to get us to the point where many red states have already completely banned abortion and more states are poised to do so as well. They're already moving on to their next goal. What's their next goal? Oh, they want a constitutional amendment that would ban abortion federally. That's what they're working on. So while Sean Hannity is telling you to chill out, I would advise you to do the exact opposite. So let's talk about what they're up to and the dark money that's being funneled to these right-wing organizations who are now organizing and lobbying for a federal ban, and also for the time being focusing on states that have legalized abortion to get it banned there as well. Now, who's behind it? Well, far-right lawyer and Federalist Society fundraiser Leonard Leo handpicked Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch for Trump's list of nominees to the Supreme Court based on their alignment with his terrible, terrible agenda, which included reversing Roe. He was also instrumental to the appointment of Alito and John Roberts and worked on the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. So the Federalist Society handpicks right-wing zealots to install in the Supreme Court. Trump took that list of zealots and was like, looks good to me. And he succeeded in confirming 3 of them, okay? That's part of the reason why we're experiencing this disgusting, draconian reversal of Roe as we speak. Now, what is he up to? Leo now helms a web of dark money groups that have raised over $580 million in recent years and has been trying to roll back decades of precedent on reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, environmental protections, the separation of church and state, and more. And he is working closely with a specific group that has a very specific goal. Students for Life has Leo as co-chair of its board and has led the charge in promoting extreme anti-abortion bills in state legislatures. Let's just pause for a second, come back to me. So if you're living in a blue state and you think, I'm safe, I live in California, blue state, it's a blue state. Look, it doesn't take much to corrupt a politician. And politicians, from what we have experienced in recent decades, are certainly not principled people. So if there's a ton of money flowing into their campaign coffers from people who want to roll back our reproductive rights, is there some possibility they'll be persuaded by that funding? Remember, the Democratic Party used to be the party that represented ordinary Americans, ordinary workers. It was the party of FDR, the party of the New Deal. And now, as you guys can probably tell, in terms of economic policy, it's really difficult to draw a distinction between the right and the left in Congress. So I give you that as a red flag, a warning sign for anyone who's living in a blue state who thinks like, no, we keep electing Democratic lawmakers in our state, we're safe. No one's safe. No one's safe. So there's that. On a state level, they have a plan. Let's continue reading that graphic though. Students for Life has taken credit for authoring and introducing 27 bills in 19 states in the last 2 legislative sessions, including its signature Life at Conception bill, already passed in Oklahoma and Arkansas, which bans abortions even in cases of rape or incest. And that's the other thing. This is an extremist group. These are extremist theocrats, okay? Let's not make any mistake about it. And what they wanna do is force pregnancies, force childbirth, regardless of the circumstances. Now, it's also worth mentioning that these zealots are not in any way interested in bolstering social spending programs to ensure that children living in poverty don't die as a result of starvation or not having a roof over their head. They're not interested in that. No, they're interested in controlling your life, okay? The party that purports to be in favor of freedom and liberty wants to get involved in your bedroom. They want to get involved in what you can do with your body. That's who these people are. Students for life, students for life. So let's continue. The legislative push is part of the post-Roe blueprint crafted by Students for Life, the organization's, Students for Life Action, which is the organization's 501c4 arm. The blueprint is a 6-step plan meant to ensure Roe's reversal, leads to a blanket ban on abortion without exceptions for rape or incest in all corners of the country. Students for Life leader Christian Hawkins announced at the 2022 National Pro-Life Summit that the group's ultimate goal is a constitutional amendment barring abortion throughout America. I'm sorry to do this to my team. I just want to cue up that video featuring Sean Hannity again. Because you're gonna hear this argument from the right wing over and over again. Because guess what? Banning abortion, super unpopular. Republicans right now are concerned that what they have done to women in this country, in stripping them of their reproductive rights, stripping them of their agency, autonomy over their own bodies, they're worried it might hurt them in the upcoming midterms. They're concerned. So they have all these goons downplay the damage that has been done, the damage that we are likely to experience if we get complacent and think we're safe because we live in blue states. Here again is an example of the lies you will be told over and over again by the right wing. And every time you hear it, you must reject it and be clear about what the right wing is up to. Let's watch one more time.
So abortion is not illegal. It's not gonna be illegal in your state of Michigan. I'd bet my last dollar that's not gonna be the case. Am I wrong?
Well, no, it is illegal in the state right now. In 1931, Michigan passed one of the first anti-abortion laws. It says that there is no abortion.
So they have a trigger provision, but wouldn't you expect with Governor Whitmer and the legislature as it's currently configured, wouldn't you expect that the likelihood of them changing that is going to be pretty swift?
Here's what I would expect. I would expect the right wing to do what it always does. Lie to the American people, claim to be the party that believes in liberty and freedom while they simultaneously strip us of our rights and enjoy themselves while they do it. That is what the right wing is about. They'll tell us that they care about lives while they cry like little children over wearing a mask during a global pandemic dealing with a highly contagious and lethal virus. That is the right wing. They are liars. They don't believe in freedom. They don't respect our Constitution. And what they want more than anything is to rule over us, control us, and have a say in every part of our lives. Again, including what we do in our own bedrooms. Clarence Thomas sitting there worried about butt love in his Supreme Court decision. Why are you thinking about butt love? You little creep. Jesus Christ, man. We knew you were a creep during that investigation into your sexual harassment. But imagine writing a concurring decision in reversing Roe to warn people that you're gonna try to ban butt love. These people are creeps. We gotta take a break. We'll be right back. What's up, friends? Welcome back to our social break. Let's read some super chats, starting with Dragon's Toy, who says, I've got the idea that the Beast has a video log of all the time POTUS is inside, even before he gets inside, mandatory receipts. Yeah, I'm curious about that. I don't know if there's a camera in there, but it would be interesting if we had footage. R. Stone says, so while Trump was throwing ketchup at the walls, his followers were smearing feces on the Capitol walls. Yet this man could still possibly run and win in 2024. Again, it goes to what I was saying about why Americans don't trust our institutions. It's because everything that is supposed to happen isn't happening, right? All of the, obstacles that are supposed to be put in place to prevent someone like Donald Trump doing the stuff that he does. It feels like everything has eroded in many ways, and it's dangerous. It really is. So let's go to the whole funk, nothing but the funk, who says Trump had no intention of going to the Capitol with his supporters. He'll gladly let his idiot supporters take the fall while he goes and watches on TV with popcorn. Yeah, I don't know. But the other thing that I want to say is, it doesn't really matter, right? Like whether or not he tried to go to the Capitol doesn't matter as much as, again, all of the other testimony we heard, all of the other things that were said, including the fact that he knew that his supporters were heavily armed. He wanted them to be armed, and he directed them to go to the Capitol knowing that they were armed. And at the same time, when he was told, hey, can you please step in and do something about this? They're chanting, hang Mike Pence. He not only refused to say something to kind of calm everyone down, he said, I don't know, maybe Pence deserves it. That's not good. Don't shoot, I'm the goalkeeper says, Michigan's a blue state too. How the hell did we end up with one of these trigger laws? It's a super old law. So I think politics change, the politics within these states change. But yeah, had a trigger law, it's crazy. Ginni says, Anna, isn't it too ironic? SCOTUS made the decision about overthrowing Roe as well as Kamala's interview with Dana Bash right before Congress recess for weeks. The timing was perfectly orchestrated. Interesting point. I mean, I think trying to bury a Supreme Court decision on a Friday, especially a Supreme Court decision this consequential, was stupid. Like the fact that they probably thought, oh, it's Friday. Everything works the way that it used to work. So everyone's gonna ignore it because they're looking forward to the weekend. Got news for you, SCOTUS. Most people work like 7 days a week at this point, and no one's gonna forget a Supreme Court ruling that's gonna have a massive impact on their lives. Anyway, KM in our Twitch community, KM81677 says, Anna saying butt love is my favorite thing today. I think because I don't want to sound judgmental. Anal sex sounds not nice for some reason. I like butt love, so you don't sound judgmental when you're talking about it. Butt love, nice. All right, anyway, got to get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian. In the second hour, Jessica Burbank will be joining me to talk about more news, including what the FCC wants to do to one of the most popular social media platforms. And so we'll get to that a little later. But for now, I want to talk about essentially Republican candidates who have meltdowns when they get called out on their BS culture war narratives. And Kari Lake is really front and center for this story. So let's do it. The Trump-backed Arizona gubernatorial candidate, Kari Lake, was appalled, just absolutely outraged that someone over at Fox News would ask her a difficult question. Now, as a Republican who's going on a Republican-friendly network like Fox, she would expect to be given a round of applause, a bunch of fluff and softball questions. But shockingly, she was asked about Richard Stevens, who's a popular drag queen from Phoenix who claimed that Lake had been a close friend of his, that Lake would go to his performances regularly, and that Lake even invited him to perform at an event at her home with her children present. Let's keep that in mind, with her children who were in elementary school at the time present. Important part of the story. Now, when she was asked about it, she didn't like it. So why don't we take a quick look at her exchange with Bret Baier?
The Washington Post has a story today. It says Arizona GOP candidate who criticized drag queens was once a fan, according to a drag queen. This is the quote: Arizona GOP gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake, who has attacked drag queens as dangerous to children, attended the shows of drag queen Richard Stevens for more than 20 years and once hired him to perform at her home. Do you care to address that?
I do care. I actually do care to address that, and I'm really shocked. I'm actually appalled that Fox News would take a defamatory story like that, and we are pursuing legal action against this drag queen. I'm appalled that you would bring that up.
Which drag queen is she appalled by? She's appalled by being asked questions about this drag queen, the one that she's posing in a picture with right here. Again, Richard Stevens is his name. The one that she invited to her home to perform at an event with her children present. That drag queen, is that what she's talking about? She's gonna sue him. Good luck with that. Looking forward to that defamation lawsuit and to see where it goes. I'm guessing in the trash if it ever gets filed in the first place. But putting that aside, why are you shocked that anyone would ask you about these allegations when really the entirety of your gubernatorial campaign centers on hating trans people? I mean, this is what Republicans do. Republicans don't have anything to offer you. By the way, Democrats have their own flavor of this, so they're not innocent, okay? But Republicans lean in heavy on the culture war narratives because that's all they've got. Watch Ben Shapiro's show, it's all he talks about. Culture war, be afraid of the gays, be afraid of the trans people, be afraid of abortion, be afraid of this, be afraid of that. Various groups of people, culture. That's it, that's all they talk about. Because what is the other alternative? Would they talk about reforming economic policies that are increasingly, causing more and more poverty among the working class in this country? Is that what they would talk about? Reforming the economic policies that their corporate donors are paying them to maintain, that their corporate donors love and don't want to change. Is that what they would campaign on? People of Arizona, please elect me because I would do favors for my corporate donors and I will continue protecting this economic landscape that puts you at a significant disadvantage. Is that what she would campaign on? Is that what Kari Lake would campaign? No, she's campaigning on, look at me, I hate trans people, even though I'm used to be good friends with one and invited one over to my home to perform with my children present. Why are you shocked that anyone would ask you this question? You made your bed. You made your bed. This is what you want your issue to be. So let's talk about the issue. Let's, in fact, go to the next video.
When you have not talked about our stolen election, you failed to talk about
We just spent 3
that.
questions, Ms. Lake, talking about this. I just asked you a number of questions about it. I played the Arizona House Speaker.
This is the first of it.
Let's address this story that's in the Washington Post. Every candidate takes tough stories. I'm asking you to respond to it if you'd like to.
I'm happy to address it, but I'm really disappointed in Fox. I thought you were a little better than CNN.
Got these pictures of you with him, Richard Stevens.
Brett,
and what about the Post? I've performed for Carrie's birthday. I've performed in her home.
That's not
I've
true.
performed for her at some of the seediest bars in Phoenix. I don't want to ask these questions. I asked you to address them.
I think you do want to ask them, but you don't want to ask about 2,000 mules.
Oh, okay. So that's her other campaigning topic. The other big issue, helping Trump overturn the election, spreading conspiracies about the election. That's all she's got. I mean, these people are clowns. And what I would just suggest to Republican voters, listen, I get it. Politics has long devolved into this ridiculous tit for tat tribal garbage where you're willing to do anything and everything to support your side, even while they're punching you in the face. But I would just ask everyone, including Democratic voters, to take a step back for a second and look at these campaigns and really ask yourself, how is this hatred toward another group of people gonna make my life better? How does this help me put food on the table for my family? How does this help me pay my rent, my mortgage? What does this do to enrich my life and my family's lives? And I will guarantee you that with the vast majority of candidates, the answer is nothing. And maybe it feels good for right-wing voters, right? To hear some woman who looks like, she was a soap opera reject, talking about how much she hates trans people, great. But turns out she doesn't really hate trans people. She's just using this, exploiting fear about people who are already incredibly misunderstood, people who have no power, people who have incredibly high suicide rates as a result of the kind of commentary and rhetoric you're hearing from her. She's just exploiting them for power. That's it. Not for you, power for her. She couldn't care less what happens to the people of Arizona. Soap opera career failed. She needs another gig. By the way, I'm kidding about the soap opera thing, but doesn't she look like she's a soap opera actress? Like, let's keep it real. If you're going to make the culture war your front and center issue, then yeah, you should be asked about it. The only thing that's shocking is that she was asked about it on Fox, and maybe that's why she's so outraged. But you should be prepared to defend yourself if, again, this is your main topic. And you have been accused by a famous drag queen of being a good friend of his who has also invited him to your home. Now, one other thing I want to note is, look, fact of the matter is this is an issue that we see among most Republican politicians. In fact, on a state level, you have Republican politicians proposing legislation that would ban trans athletes from participating in school sports with the gender they identify with. And I thought this was a great headline because it's absolutely accurate. Lawmakers can't cite local examples of trans girls in sports. Interesting, let's dig a little deeper. Legislators in more than 20 states have introduced bills this year, this is from 2021 by the way, that would ban transgender girls from competing on girls' sports teams in public high schools. Yet in most every case, sponsors cannot cite a single instance in their own state or region where such participation has caused problems. Wow, are you surprised by that? Because I'm not. It almost seems like they want to give the illusion of governing, of legislating, when in reality, they're collecting checks. They're chilling, they don't care about you. More, in South Carolina, for example, Representative Ashley Trantham said she knew of no transgender athletes competing in the state and was proposing a ban to prevent possible problems in the future. Oh my God, look at them, they're taking initiative. That's what politicians are known for, right? They act before there's a problem. Except, that's not true. Let me give you more. And by the way, let me be clear, I don't see this as a problem, okay? I see what they're doing in exploiting this issue or turning it into turning a non-issue into an issue for politics, for power accumulation. This is what they do, but there's more. Otherwise, she said, during a recent hearing, the next generation of female athletes in South Carolina may not have a chance to excel. I got news for you, bitch. Most kids at this point don't really have a chance to excel. How are you gonna excel when you have to dig yourself into hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt in order to get a decent college education, which is required to get a decent job? You wanna talk about people excelling? These are politicians who stand in the way of people excelling every single day. Let's go to Tennessee. House Speaker Cameron Sexton. Oh, we should ban that last name. It has sex in it. It seems very bad. Conceded there may not be transgender students now participating in middle and high school sports. He said a bill was necessary so the state could be proactive. Sexton wants to be proactive. I mean, there are issues that are really impacting the people of his state as we speak, issues related to their economic anxiety, but who cares about that? He doesn't want to be proactive about that. No, that'd be a waste, and it would probably upset his donors. So instead, let's go after the powerless, let's demonize them, let's turn them into scapegoats, and continue to stay in power because people let it happen, voters let it happen. Wake up, guys. I don't understand the hatred people have in their hearts for groups of people who are powerless in the first place. But even if you do, how does it make your life better to support politicians who give you nothing, offer you nothing other than more hatred, more division, more destruction in this country? And Carrie Lake crying about being asked about the #1 issue she talks about on the campaign trail is rich. If you can't take the heat, get the hell out of the campaign. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, Jessica Burbank will be joining me, and there's some breaking news that is enraging. So come right back for that and more.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hutchingson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country, so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Jessica Burbank with you. John Iadarola is off, so Jessica's here, which I'm very excited about. Jessica, there's some breaking news, and I'm trying to breathe as I'm reading about it. It's infuriating to say the least. So let's get started. Why don't we talk about it?
Yeah.
So, breaking news. President Joe Biden is poised to nominate a right-wing, anti-abortion federal judge who will have a lifetime appointment. And Biden has done this, or is poised to do it. It hasn't happened yet, but he's poised to do it in what has been described as a deal with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Now, keep in mind, this is a deal that Biden is making with the other side, with the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, even though Democrats hold a majority in Congress, a simple majority in the Senate and a meteor majority in the House. Now, the Senate is what matters here because we're talking about appointments, we're talking about nominees who need to be confirmed, and here's what happened. So the nomination of Chad Meredith, that's the potential federal judge here, appears to be the result of a deal with US Senator Mitch McConnell, ostensibly in exchange, get a load of this, for the Senate Minority Leader agreeing not to hold up future federal nominations by the Biden White House. What? First of all, that the deal is garbage. Like, I would not take that deal. I would not even entertain that deal. But putting that aside for a second, even if that's really what you want, Biden, if you really desperately just want Mitch McConnell to stop holding up these confirmations, do you actually take him at his word, you moron? You're going to allow for a lifetime appointment of a federal judge who is against reproductive rights, who has made a career out of it. I can't F the Democrats, F Biden. I do not support him. I will not vote for him. I will not tell a single soul to vote for him. He is not our friend, just not. And I don't want to hear from a damn centrist about how dangerous the Republican Party is. I'm just not interested because even when Democrats are in charge, they let the Republican Party take over. They just do. I mean, Jessica, I'm so enraged right now, I can't even think straight.
This is Biden again, folding to the Republicans. If you think about what a deal should be, that means someone on both sides gets something. You only need a simple majority in the Senate for a federal nomination to be confirmed. So if we have Manchin and we have Sinema and we have Kamala Harris with the tiebreaker, we don't even need to broker a deal with Mitch McConnell to have this happen. Think about what this federal judge who's appointed to serve for life will do now. The one safeguard we've had to protect women at a time when our reproductive rights are under attack and women will die if they do not have safe and legal access to abortion. We've seen some judges in some states pass injunctions so that these trigger laws don't go into effect. Now we have a federal judge in a post-Roe America that was allowed to be appointed and is appointed by a Democratic president. This is insane. People are already upset with the Democrats for not doing anything. Now, it's not that they're not doing anything, they're taking active measures to make this worse.
I would advise the Democratic Party to allow for Joe Biden to give up after his first term is over and to find someone else, okay? Someone else to run for the Democratic Party. Because I, under no circumstance at this point, will support Biden. I don't trust Biden. I don't like Biden. I think that he is a feckless, disgusting, corrupt tool for corporate America. And honestly, at this point, for the right-wing zealots, religious zealots in this country. That's what he's doing. It's a lifetime appointment. In exchange for what? Mitch McConnell allowing for, the confirmation hearings for your nominees? Who cares? Who cares? First of all, who cares about that? Don't you have a majority in the Senate? Why do you need the Republican Party to play ball with you on this? And why do you even need them to be confirmed? I mean, how many people served in Trump's administration who had never been confirmed? Never been acting this, acting that, acting, AG. It was acting everywhere.
For a long time.
What is he doing? What is that? No, but this is who he is, guys. This is who he is. The Republicans, yes, they're awful. They're awful. And I understand the mindset of Democratic voters in 2020 who got scared when they saw a candidate like Bernie Sanders, because in their minds, and based on what they were told incessantly in the corporate media, well, if we nominate the more popular candidate who actually wants to implement the changes that would make our lives better, there's a chance that he might lose against Donald Trump. So instead, let's promote and support this honestly half asleep, half Republican goon who really has nothing to offer us. Biden's whole campaign was, I was in the Senate once and I know how to talk to people. Oh, great. You are a failure. He has failed us on pretty much everything. Unbelievable. The only good thing I've seen come out of the Biden administration that's substantive is his National Labor Relations Board, which is significantly better than what we got under Trump. But outside of that, Biden is a disaster. How would you ever take Mitch McConnell at his word for anything? And what you would even get from this side of the deal if he actually carried it out, if he was actually a man of his word, it doesn't even really matter that much. I just don't get it, man. This party is embarrassing. I can't support them. I don't support them. I can't. I don't know what to tell you. I think that the Democrats would make a huge mistake by letting him run for a second term. They should tell him to go back to bed and let a progressive run. I don't even care who at this point. Just get him out. I hate this man with every fiber of my being at this point.
A lot of people have said that, Joe Biden has changed a lot since he was younger and he was a senator. When he would say things like, I don't believe a woman has the sole right to decide what happens in her body. They say his political views have changed since he's been in that era and he said those things. This pretty much proves that perhaps that's not true. Perhaps he still believes those things. And for a long time, we've said, the administration isn't really doing much. It's a sign of weakness. I honestly don't think it's weakness at this point. I think it's intentional. I think they're very intentionally contributing to our country devolving, to be entirely honest. They are protecting the neoliberal order. And let's be very real, that the Democratic establishment handpicked Joe Biden as the nominee. The American people did not pick Joe Biden as the nominee. Obama and other people in the Democratic establishment called up all of the candidates who were running. There were a lot of options for people to pick from when deciding who they wanted to be their party's candidate for president. And Bernie Sanders was the front runner, and they wanted to stop Bernie Sanders. They wanted to stop the progressive agenda. And so everyone dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden in exchange for political favors, in exchange for cabinet positions. That's not how a democracy should run. And because primaries are party business, there are not election laws that can protect things like this from happening so long as we are supporting the Democratic Party and partaking in Democratic Party primaries. And it's disgusting. We need competitive primaries for a democracy. We didn't elect Joe Biden. Let's be very real. The Democratic Party handpicked him as their candidate. And look what he is doing now, making things far worse. Bernie Sanders was fighting for protecting women's reproductive freedoms.
And let's also not forget that after the draft opinion that would reverse Roe was leaked, the first thing that we heard from Clyburn, Jim Clyburn, who's the House Majority Whip, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was that they'd be endorsing anti-reproductive rights goon Henry Cuellar in Texas. So you're right. They are no longer an obstacle to the Republican Party. They're no longer an obstacle to the destruction of our liberty that the Republican Party is fighting so aggressively for. They aid and abet. They aid and abet. They love it. How are they gonna fearmonger about the right wing when they aid and abet them and what they have on their agenda? No, it's beyond shameful. I do not support Joe Biden. I will not vote for him under any circumstance. Sorry, this is it. This is the nail in the coffin for me. He shouldn't run in 2024. It would be the biggest mistake for the Democratic Party to run with Joe Biden on the Democratic ticket. Don't do it. I ain't gonna support it. I'm not gonna vote shame either. But if you're a centrist watching the show and you're rolling your eyes at what I'm saying, stop watching. You're part of the problem too. Sit down. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome to our social break, everyone. All right, let's go to some comments. Very curious what you all have to say. Ganja Goddess Dragon says, isn't Biden Catholic? I wonder if deep down he's against abortion rights. I mean, I'm sure he personally is, right? But anyway, just we need to get rid of these, like we have cadavers like governing the country with the Democratic Party. It's insane. Jax Drax says, the Dems don't care. They are owned and paid for by the same corrupt goons who own the GOP. They're no different. They just pretend they are. Yeah, I think that's becoming increasingly clear. There might be some issues on the fringes, but overall, look, one thing that they do that I think is a little sophisticated is they'll put out legislation, right? And they'll approve it in certain ways. Like in this case, they'll get it approved in the House to make a point about how Democrats are so great. They're trying to accomplish all these wonderful things. And then they know that in the Senate, there's enough corporate Democrats to block that legislation from passing. So it helps with their little PR trick of presenting themselves as, these, anyway, these great people who want to do these great things to protect our rights. But at the end of the day, they always find an excuse for why they can't accomplish what they claim they want to accomplish. Julia in our super chat section says, at conception, 6 to 12 days for a fertilized egg to go and attach to the uterus. 1/3 to 1/2 don't. All women are murderers. I can't with the nonsense and stupidity. Yeah, I mean, look, there will be women prosecuted in states where they consider, the beginning of life at conception, not even when it's implanted in the uterine wall. So have you been drinking? Have you been exercising too aggressively? Is that why you miscarried? Is that why you had issues with your pregnancy? There's gonna be all sorts of issues. Waldorf Nation, a moldy ham sandwich would be better than Joe Biden. Hashtag ham sandwich 2024. Thank you for that. I needed to laugh, so I appreciate it. Lady Shub says, pretending that they won't make a federal ban on abortion is ludicrous. Their whole platform is based on convincing people that babies are being murdered. Half the country won't be allowed to murder babies. All right, and let's go to Joanna Morton, who says, abortion, SCOTUS has moved it to 2 forums, states and Congress. One Congress can be overturned by another, states change, it's Dred Scott. Bhatia says, Anna, please help. My girlfriend says she won't stop supporting Trump. Should I leave her? Listen, I'm not gonna give you advice on your relationship. You gotta make choices for yourself, especially on something that personal. So sorry, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian and Jessica Burbank with you. Let's get right to our next story. Private insurance companies have been capitalizing on mass shootings, especially as more and more companies and institutions are looking to purchase insurance policies that would protect them from lawsuits should a mass shooter show up to their establishment and open fire. Now, turns out that since there have been so many of these shootings, the premiums associated with these policies have gone up. And if you think this isn't going to impact you in any way, you would be wrong. First, let's learn a little more about what these insurance policies entail. Active shooter insurance typically covers victim lawsuits, building repairs, legal fees, medical expenses, and trauma counseling. Now, if you're wondering, well, how much does this cost? How much have the premiums for this type of thing gone up? Chris Parker, head of political violence and deadly weapons protection at Lloyd's of London insurer Beazley, said the insurer had seen a 25% jump in revenue so far this year for its deadly weapon policy, with 30 to 35% jump, with a 30 to 35% jump in inquiries and a 10% to 15% increase in rates, driven by the rising number and severity of gun attacks. So as I'm giving you the details of the story, what I want you to really take in here is putting this in the context of a political system, an economic system where profits will always take priority over human lives. Profits will always take priority over human lives. I say that because this is now an industry that is profiting handsomely off of our failure to do a damn thing about gun violence, about laxed gun laws, about what we're seeing day in, day out with these mass shootings. And if you have an industry that is benefiting from it, profiting from it, they're gonna lobby to protect the laxed gun laws that we have today. Let me give you more. Going back to Chris Parker, the gentleman we heard from earlier, he said clients are now buying insurance to cover themselves for 5 to 10 million in losses compared to 1 to 3 million just 4 years ago. Policy holders typically can pay tens of thousands of dollars for 1 million in coverage. Beazley's clients include schools, which are publicly funded, municipalities, publicly funded, houses of worship, bars and restaurants. So when you think about our underfunded public schools, think about the fact that now a portion of their resources will be spent on active shooter insurance. And these premiums are gonna keep going up, Jessica. If there's one thing we know, the premiums will always keep going up.
Absolutely, we can learn a lesson from private health insurance. They have been lobbying year after year, over $600 million a year in lobbying from private health insurance. Why? Because every year, Congress considers passing legislation that will make healthcare more accessible in the United States. Why do we think they do not? Because they're taking a ton of money and their pockets are lined by private healthcare companies that want to keep profiting off of giving people a basic right, access to healthcare. We're going to see this happen as well now with the active shooter insurance lobby, which is insane. It's insane that there is even an industry around this, that this is even necessary. And do we think that with these premiums going up, the corporations are going to, eat that cost? Absolutely not. They're going to want to keep their profit margins precisely where they are, which means they're going to push that additional cost to the consumer and they're going to raise prices so that they don't have to cut into their profits in order to have this insurance.
That's such a great point. I mean, it's anytime you see something broken in our system and you think, well, I mean, I don't own a business, so I'm probably gonna be untouched by this. You're not, as you know, the lobbying is going to continue to maintain these terrible laxed gun laws. And I say that as someone who on multiple occasions on this show, I've told you, I'm not in favor of banning guns, right? I do think that there are common sense gun policies that we should implement so people can't just go to a gun show and willy-nilly buy whatever they want without a federal background check, for instance. But putting that aside, yeah, you're right. I mean, profits don't trickle down to ordinary Americans, but one thing that does trickle down to ordinary Americans is added costs for businesses. So we will be paying more for, various things that we buy as consumers. We will see more of our taxpayer money, more of our resources going toward this as opposed to other things that we need, like better textbooks for students and things like that in our public schools. And churches are concerned as well. For instance, Church Mutual, a leading insurer of religious organizations in the United States, said it had seen a 10 to 15% rise in inquiries around armed intruders and mass shooters, and an increase in requests for services. Church Mutual has seen more demand for its Pull for Police device, which allows a customer to pull a tab, triggering a signal to law enforcement that there's an armed intruder event. And by the way, insurers are already charging schools, healthcare institutions, and retail establishments more for cover, and prices in general are 5 to 10% higher than last year. So this issue is costing us money. It's also killing us because of the fact that our lawmakers won't do anything about gun laws, won't do anything about these mass shooters. And then you've got the weapons manufacturers who are making money off of it. So anytime you see something broken and you're wondering why isn't anyone fixing it, it's because there's either a company or just a group of people making money off of it. Profits over people in a country that just did away with constitutional rights for women to have abortions.
Yeah, let's also think, I want to compare what's going on in the US right now to what's going on in Europe, right? There are a lot of laws about who can have guns and where in Europe. They have far less mass shootings than us. There are also a lot of policies in Europe where the government taxes you for a service like universal health care, and you get health care. A lot of people complain that in many European countries, well, they pay such high taxes, I don't want to pay high taxes. In many cases, people in the United States are paying a higher tax rate, but not getting the public goods that are guaranteed in those European countries. Think about what you pay in taxes and what the government is doing with that money. Do we want to pay taxes to our government so that they can potentially have to subsidize active shooter insurance? Or would we rather them regulate when and where people can have guns and how they can get them, and not have to pay that extra premium when we're going to the stores because the corporations are pushing that cost onto the consumer, and not having to pay our elected officials who are then going to be lobbied by these people to not pass legislation that's commonsensical to change this? We're paying so many premiums in the United States on top of our taxes. We pay for our own private health care. Our taxes are already high. We might as well add to that figure the same public goods that are observed in other modern countries. We would be paying insane taxes if we accounted for all of the things that they pay for at a much lower tax rate. It's insane to me that people in the United States are okay with this. And if you ask anyone in any other country what the political spectrum is in the United States, by the way, they would tell you that Democrats are on the right. And people in the United States are told by mainstream media that Biden is extremely far left. Think about what this does to the average American viewer of mainstream news. Now they think if I think anything that's to the left of Biden, that would be insane. This is how they've essentially tricked and propagandized the American public to pretty much stay within the confines of neoliberalism and not question it. And now I think people are starting to wake up to it, and I hope that continues.
Me too. Well, let's move on to something completely different. There is some news today about what the FCC wants to do in regard to a social media platform. Let's discuss.
Yeah, well, most people look at TikTok and they say, well, what's the big deal? It's just another viral video sharing app. And that's just the sheep's clothing. As you walk through, it is a sophisticated tool for harvesting this data. And one thing that we do know is that right now the CCP is running one of the most widespread data gathering operations out there. And TikTok has repeatedly said, don't worry, your data is stored in the US. What we've come to find out through some of this investigative reporting and leaked documents is, in fact, according to TikTok employees, everything is seen in China.
The man you just heard from is Brendan Carr. He's one of the 5 FCC commissioners, federal communications commissioners, and he is very clear about what he wants Google and Apple to do. He wants them to remove TikTok from their app stores. And if you're thinking, man, this is happening under Biden, isn't this what Trump wanted to do? Well, there's a reason why it sounds a lot like what the Trump administration wanted to do. Brendan Carr happens to be a Trump appointee who unfortunately is still part of the FCC under the Biden administration. So this is really more about him as opposed to what Biden wants to do. But here's what Carr said in a letter to Apple CEO Tim Cook and Google CEO Sundar Pichai. He said, quote, "I am writing the two of you because it is clear that TikTok poses an unacceptable national security risk due to its extensive data harvesting being combined with Beijing's apparently unchecked access to that sensitive data." It's kind of amazing that all of a sudden the FCC is concerned about social media platforms collecting our data. Now TikTok, he says in that same letter, collects everything from search and browsing histories to keystroke patterns and biometric identifiers, including face prints, which researchers have said might be used in unrelated facial recognition technology and voice prints. Now, how dare they do that over at China? Don't they know that US-based companies need to do that on behalf of the United States government? Anyway, let me keep going. It collects location data as well as draft messages and metadata. Plus, it has collected the text, images, and videos that are stored on a device's clipboard. Now, listen, I don't deny that TikTok is doing what Brendan Carr is saying they're doing. In fact, there was an investigation done by BuzzFeed News on this matter. They released it last week, and it revealed that employees in China have repeatedly accessed non-public user data from the United States. By the way, this US data was often accessed as part of an initiative that was ironically called Project Texas. And Project Texas is an ongoing effort to move all of TikTok's US data into a data storage center in Texas. Now, again, Donald Trump is the person who nominated Carr for this position back in 2007. His term began in 2018 and will last through 2023. That's why he's still part of the FCC. But I have an issue with this. Not because I don't believe that TikTok is collecting our data and accessing sensitive information about us. It's just that every social media platform, every website does this. And I wish they were more concerned about the general issue of private information being accessed and sold to third parties by corporations, whether they be in China or the United States.
Absolutely, yeah. Terrifying what Cambridge Analytica did in the 2020 election. That was really the first time that I realized how serious data misuse is, where they took people's data from Facebook, by the way, an American-based company, and they identified who on Facebook was a persuadable voter, and then Cambridge Analytica targeted them with misinformation. There are many rumors that this did influence the 2020 election. Of course, that's disputed, but it's scary that it's even a possibility. And will I, a zillennial who likes using TikTok, be upset if Biden bans it? Of course, dopamine is really hard to come by these days. But the point is that I'm not any safer if it's a US-based corporation stealing my data than if it's a company in China. It really doesn't make a difference to me. And I think that there's a deeper reason for why they're considering this. And I will say that on TikTok, there's a lot of political content. There's a lot of political organizing happening. There's a lot of education happening. It's turned into a public forum where people can be radicalized with the amount of information that's on there and can be shared. A lot of people have learned a lot about their politics on TikTok, and I use my TikTok account to do the same thing. Do I think the US government is scared of this? Of course, absolutely. And so I think if TikTok is banned, we need someone to purchase perhaps the back end code to program a similar app and have a US-based company provide the exact same service as TikTok does. because it's at this point important and a part of the public square in the United States. I think it's that serious, even though a lot of people say it's a silly dancing app. It's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that wholeheartedly. I do think that the US government concerned about people, using TikTok to get political messages out is part of it. But I do think that the bigger issue for them is just like their bitterness and an antagonistic view toward China. And this, it really started to blow up during Obama's administration when he made this so-called pivot to Asia. And really at the heart of it is the fact that we have, through our economic policies, through allowing for corporations to exploit cheap labor in other countries like China, have made China and its economy much stronger, to the point where it's now a serious competitor to the United States. And we've been selling weapons to countries surrounding Russia that we consider our allies. As a result, and in response to that, China has been bolstering its own military and its own weaponry. And so this is, when they mention national security, that is what they're referring to, because they're not actually concerned about our personal data being collected. Our personal data gets collected all the time. And in fact, Brendan Carr addressed that during an interview with CNBC. I actually haven't seen this video yet, so let's take a look at that.
Commissioner Carr, you're going after TikTok. This is a Chinese company that's operating in America, but what about American companies in China like Apple? Is there a double standard here? In response to a 2017 Chinese law, Apple agreed to move its Chinese customers' data to China and onto computers owned and run by a Chinese state-owned company. Isn't that a concern? Should this be broader ranging? Should lawmakers be looking at this?
Absolutely. I'm deeply concerned about some of the hypocrisy we see from Silicon Valley companies. Again, these are companies that stand up and say, look, we back human rights, we back privacy, and yet in their dealings with China, we see a lot of double standards in terms of they're continuing to invest, they're continuing to put US user data at risk. And so I do think this should be part and parcel of a broader look at securing US data.
I mean, but why aren't you doing something about it? Like, why is TikTok the only thing that he has taken action on? Just doesn't really seem like he's concerned about what US companies are up to. Anyway, all right, well, the other final thing I'll say about this is, even though Biden isn't the one pushing for this, it's this FCC member. Fact of the matter is, people will blame Biden for it. And look, I don't even really care. I can't stand Biden at this point. He just struck a deal with Mitch McConnell to appoint a federal judge in Kentucky, a lifetime judgeship. And this judge potential judge is awful. Anti-abortion, extreme right winger. Why would you strike a deal with the devil like that? So stupid. Anyway, but with that said, if I wanted to give Biden advice or just forecast what's gonna happen, he's already lost a lot of support among young people, and banning TikTok will make it worse. Biden's approval rating with voters under 30 has dropped 23 points since the first months of his presidency, and that's according to Gallup. Final word, Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that this is about US competition with China. It's about, the United States under Donald Trump was pushing extremely nationalist rhetoric, and Biden is essentially continuing that kind of approach to foreign policy with this. We have people like Edward Snowden saying that, hey, it's been known for a long time that foreigners' data is collected by US-based corporations. And so how can we engage in a respectable manner on the international stage? If we are playing by different standards, then we expect other nations to. Not only that, but it's absolutely backwards to assume that the United States has to compete with every other country for hegemony. The idea that the United States needs to be number one with having such an outsized spending on defense and such a huge military compared to every single other nation. It is a waste of money when you think about what are the things that make people happy? What are the things that give people a good life? Why are we competing with China over who is the biggest and best country and most powerful country in the world, instead of thinking, how can we collaborate to face this global issue of climate change that quite literally requires international collaboration? Why instead are we competing with other countries and focusing the energy on that? I thought Biden was going to usher in a new era where we actually don't look at globalism as something to be afraid of and actually realize that it is necessary for human advancement. It's insane. It feels like we're back in the 1950s this week in the United States, honestly.
Yeah, worse than that in a lot of ways. All right, well, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, looks like Joe Rogan has an idea on who he would support in the 2024 election. Spoiler alert, it is not Joe Biden. Who is it? Well, we've got that story and more coming right up. I'm already getting tweets with people who have like the blue wave in their handle on Twitter, like attacking me for not wanting to support Joe. Like these people, if they're not bots, and I think a lot of them probably are, but if they're not bots, the amount of time they spend enabling the worst politicians in the Democratic Party, I mean, they're part of what's broken. They aid and abet the destruction of good progressive candidates during the primaries. And they uplift the worst Democratic politicians who then turn around and F us. And man, days like today, it's really, really hard not to curse. Franklin Sharpslicer says, butt love, oh, I like this, derriere delights, causing concern for the right of the wing, vanilla and missionary only. No wonder they are uptight and lonely. Anna, you rock. Thank you, Franklin. That was amazing. That was I want to save that. Hold on, let me just copy this and paste it in a different document because that was really funny. All right. Okay, Pitchfork's Dragon says, boy, we could sure reach more people and grow the progressive movement if we had a later TYT primetime show. I'm thinking the TYT Evening News. All right, keep sending us that comment because I will read it and management does hear it. Michael Nourish says, Custer finally said, or famously said, a fool doesn't learn from his mistakes. The greatest fool doesn't learn from the mistakes of others. Biden seems incapable of learning from either. Seriously, what's wrong with him? Elias Banez says, I think it's time that we had more than two parties because it seems like we can't support either party because they still work against us either way. I don't know what the solution is. Third party's gonna lose. So I wish we had a system that actually supported, a multi-party system, but it just doesn't. So you can run a third party candidate all you want. That person's gonna lose, and we're at the end we're left with lesser of two evils. But I'm done with that. Like I can't. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I have completely withdrawn from electoral stuff. Like someone in the members section asked me a question about the primaries last night. No idea. And I should care about primaries. I should. Primaries are important, but I just can't stomach it. I can't stomach the horse race at this point. Crouching Normie, Hidden Dragon. By the way, I'm not giving anyone advice. Please, I'm going through something. I can't stand electoral politics. That doesn't mean that you should disengage, okay? The reason why I'm not taking part in primary coverage is because all I'm gonna say is I don't care. And that's not healthy and that's not helpful. And I'm aware of that, which is why I'm not doing electoral coverage at all. Crouching Normie, Hidden Dragon says, Biden is not folding. He's an anti-choice Catholic conservative who lied about supporting Roe for the same reason as Kavanaugh, to get power. Robert says Biden's Meredith appointment is designed to deflect anger at the theocratic Republican loons. It signals for Dems abortion is not that big of a deal. Oh my God. If that's what they really think, they're in for it. All right, we got to get back to the show. I'll see you there. Welcome back to TYT. Anna and Jessica with you. Jessica, take it away.
All right, Joe Rogan is talking into a microphone as usual. Let's watch.
Didn't Elon Musk come out recently for Desantis?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis would work as a good president. I mean, what he's done for Florida has been admirable.
Look I feel like I'm doing breaking news right now.
Yeah.
That wasn't even on purpose.
Elon Musk said it was a good idea, so it must be, naturally. So what did the Florida governor do that was so admirable? Naturally, Joe Rogan's going to tell us a long, detailed list of the things that Ron DeSantis has done for the people of Florida. Let's watch that.
I feel like what he did for Florida, a lot of people gave him a lot of grief, but ultimately he was correct. He was correct when it comes to like deaths. He was correct when it comes to protecting all vulnerable populations. He was correct in terms of distribution of monoclonal antibodies. And he was furious when the government tried to pull those. They were trying to pull very effective treatments.
All right, let's break this down because I think it's really important. He's talking about COVID deaths and he's talking about vulnerable populations. So DeSantis said, they were misreporting COVID deaths, that the numbers being reported were wrong. He's right that they were wrong. That is true. But DeSantis said the number of deaths was overstated, when in reality, the DeSantis administration was understating the numbers. So let's look at this. We had one COVID death in Florida yesterday. Yes, you read that right, one. So that was Fred Piccolo, DeSantis's press secretary at the time. So the DeSantis administration was reporting that there was one COVID death on a day where there were 47. And this was something that they were doing systematically. The DeSantis administration was audited and was found to be undercounting the COVID cases and the death toll in Florida. So we have in Hutchingson of the Miami Herald reporting that covering the state's pandemic response from March to October of 2020, the year-long analysis by the Florida Auditor General found missing case and death data, unreported ethnic and racial details, and incomplete contact tracing as the coronavirus spread across the state. So Joe Rogan specifically pointed to deaths and vulnerable populations. That is exactly the group of folks, and that's exactly the data that DeSantis's administration was responsible for underreporting. But they weren't just underreporting, as you just heard, they were also failing to prevent the spread. So the Miami Herald, again, auditors found that the state never spoke with 23% of infected individuals. Those who the state did contact were often reached over a week after testing positive, leaving ample time for them to spread the virus to others. So an admirable job. He was right, according to Joe Rogan. This was all good policymaking, presidential material. And Florida's still experiencing a high death toll under DeSantis's watch, and is the state right now with the second highest average deaths per 100,000 people in the country, with 53 average daily COVID deaths. DeSantis, he had no power over the monoclonal antibodies or the other treatments that Joe Rogan likes to talk about, like ivermectin. DeSantis really had no say in this. He was just someone who was complaining about it in the media a lot. But really, a lot of conservatives elect people who just say stuff in the media that they like while the people in their home state are dying. And I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the details you provided that debunk the notion that Ron DeSantis was an effective leader in protecting his constituents against this virus. It's so important to share that with people. But I think what's behind Joe Rogan's endorsement of Ron DeSantis is honestly like the perception of COVID and the reality of COVID versus the reality of COVID. So let me make my point. Like, what for people like Rogan, who for the most part was insulated from the coronavirus pandemic. And what I mean by that is he has the kind of job where he doesn't need to be, in front of a bunch of customers. He's not a cashier. He's not in the service industry. He is operating in a room somewhere with a few other people in there, if that, and he's safe, right? Like it doesn't really have an impact on his body, on his health, because he's insulated from it relative to what most workers have to deal with. And so when you don't really see the ramifications personally of COVID, and you see all of these rules and regulations being implemented that are just like an inconvenience for you, all you see those measures as is annoyances, inconveniences. You want it to end, you want everything to go back to normal. And he also, unfortunately, like kind of operates in a world where a lot of conspiracy theorists love to opine about what's really behind what's going on. I will say in that same podcast episode, he pushed back when his guest tried to claim that they purposely shut down businesses to like make people suffer. And he's like, he called it Monday night quarterbacking, which I thought was interesting and I agree with. But with all of that said, I just think for people like Rogan, COVID unfortunately like radicalized him in the wrong ways. And I think when you put someone like Desantis up against someone, and remember, Desantis, he's the kind of politician who wants you to like give in to all of your bad urges, right? Because the bad urge is, I don't wanna change anything. I don't wanna wear the mask. I don't like it. I get it. That resonates with me. I have to wear makeup for work. I hated putting the mask on, hated it. But I also understood like, this is temporary, it's not the end of the world. If this is what I need to do to stop the spread of this virus, I'm just gonna do it and move on with my life. But for other people, it's just like endless annoyances, especially when you exist in a more affluent situation where you're overwhelmingly insulated from the realities of the pandemic.
So true, absolutely. The case that Rogan is super disconnected from everyday Americans who had to go to work during the pandemic. And honestly, a lot of people see Rogan as a guy who speaks up for the average American, for the little guy. I don't know if I buy that. But he does have a responsibility with such a large audience to look into what he's pushing to his base. I mean, there will be people who say, I trust Joe Rogan, so maybe I'll look into Desantis now, and that's really scary. But Joe Rogan also did make a really weird statement about freedom and DeSantis right after this. Let's watch that.
He is not perfect. He's a human being, but what he's done is stand up for freedoms. And people think so this was some weird gaslighting shit that went on where people equated freedom and saying the word freedom to like right-wing bigotry and hate is so strange.
Yeah, how could we possibly confuse what DeSantis is saying with right-wing bigotry and hate? It kind of seems like Joe Rogan's the one that's confusing these two things here, because in the name of freedom, DeSantis has been pushing legislation that suggests people can't talk about LGBTQ plus identities in schools. Is that about freedom? Let's be really real about what Ron DeSantis stands for. And I think the right frequently confuses this notion of freedom with actually our rights being stripped away, as we can see with all of the Supreme Court rulings that have come out on Friday and the days afterwards. And so the right being the party of freedom and fighting for personal freedoms is something that we dissect a lot on this show and that we absolutely don't buy. And this is just a weird statement from Joe Rogan.
Yeah, and look, the Republican Party has done a very good job in their PR messaging in regard to liberty and freedom, right? They have taken the mantle of patriotism, even though they actively hate this country, hate what the Constitution entails, and want to roll back the accomplishments and improvements in this country. But it doesn't matter, because if you say something repeatedly over and over again, people start to believe it. And most people aren't spending all day reading about what's happening in government. Most people are super busy just trying to ensure that their family members are fed, making sure that they can pay the insanely expensive rent in this country. And so you just hear it over and over again in the media, and it's like, I don't know, I guess the Republicans are for freedom. Whereas the Democrats, just MIA, no strategy, no effective messaging. And yeah, I think that the left needs to get better about labeling the right wing as anti-freedom, anti-liberty. I want to emphasize over and over again how much the right wing wants to legislate what you're allowed to do in your own bedroom. Like, that's on their mind. That's not freedom. Okay, that is allowing for the government to make decisions for you in the most intimate areas of your life, whether it's reproductive rights, whether it's what you do with your partner intimately in your own bedroom. They want to do away with certain contraceptives. They're not about freedom and liberty at all, period. And by the way, on top of all of that, they want to punish you if you take part in the BDS movement, which should also be considered unconstitutional, but we've got religious zealots in the Supreme Court, so. Well, bonus episode is next. We'll see you all there, tyt.com/join.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them, turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with